I stand here in the silence, with the ink still barely dry, every word a weight we carry, every hope a reason why. We have argued, we have questioned, we have trembled at the cost, but a people can't stay shackled when they know the freedom's lost. So I steady my conviction, though the road is steep and long, for the truth demands our courage, and the weak must become the strong.
With a firm reliance on providence above, we pledge our lives and fortunes in a bond of sacred love.
Though the night is full of danger, still we choose to carry on, for the promise of tomorrow is a light that leads us on.
Hour 3 on this Tuesday, the 16th of June, brought to you by O'Galley Electric. If you go to BillMick.com, the headline for the show page today is America, We're Better. Joining us for the day has been Dave Bowman, and of course, 8 o'clock on Tuesdays, he always brings us Dave Does History. On that show page, there are links to both Dave Does History and What the Frock. So go to BillMick.com, link up to Dave's work. I share it when I get the opportunity to do that for you as well on my Facebook page. And Dave, for over a year now, we've been pursuing this Declaration of Independence. Where are we going looking for it today?
On the morning of July 4th, 1776, in that room at Independence Hall in Philadelphia, 56 men are gathered. The document is laid out. They're going to decide, is this the document we want to submit or not? We always talk about the lesser known of these men. Some of them we've talked about, some of them we haven't talked about. But as a conglomerate, I had to try to pick one who might have represented most fervently the American exceptionalism that we've been talking about. You might think I'd pick a tall, broad-shouldered mountain of a man who, spoke with a loud voice or, did amazing things. But no, we're going to talk about one of the most multi-talented but most overlooked signers of the Declaration of Independence. He was from New Jersey. And the best physical description we have of him comes from John Adams, who wrote, "He is a pretty, little, curious, ingenious man with a head not much bigger than a large apple."
That'll be interesting, and we pick it up in 1 minute on WMMB. This is almost, Dave, like saying you're the smartest dumb person I know. There are compliments hidden inside the insults, or vice versa. Pretty, little, curious, ingenious man with a head not bigger than a large apple. John Adams, was he having fun? Was he trying to be accurate in his description? I don't know.
It's hard to know for sure, isn't it?
Yeah.
But here is this man. His name is Francis Hopkinson. And he is one of the 56 men in that room. He is a scholar, by the way. He is one of the first graduates from what will become the College of Philadelphia. In fact, when he graduates, it's still called the Academy of Philadelphia. He is sent there. He's an inventor. He actually still holds the patent, the invention for a thing called a spring block. Now, unless you're a sailor, you have no idea what that is. But for sailing ships, the spring block is what really made speed of shifting sails and shifting rigging efficient and easy and fast. He invented this in the 1760s, 1760s. He's a practicing lawyer. 1761, he's actually admitted to the bar in Pennsylvania. As far as we know, he did not use AI for any of those. He is a musician. He takes Ben Franklin's harmonica, the music machine that Ben Franklin invented that everybody talks about. He actually made it work. He added a keyboard. He did some things to it. He's a very accomplished harpsichord player. He's a poet, and he knows it. And he's a visual designer as well. He's what they call a polymath, I guess, is the best phrase for it. He actually becomes America's first known composer in the sense of he actually produces a piece of music that is written down. You can still hear it today. The secular song is called My Days Have Been So Wondrous Free, which he publishes in 1759. Having heard it, I don't really recommend it, but it's notable in having been the first song that is accredited to an American composer in the world of secular music.
I didn't see it anywhere on Billboard.
No, you're probably not. You got to really search for this. You can go to the Library of Congress and find it. It's the earliest surviving secular composition that we know of. There may have been others, who knows? And of course, there's always religious stuff. And, in those days, it was not unusual to just write lyrics to old tunes, which is what John Dickinson did last week. But there you go. He later dedicated a book of 7 songs to George Washington, cementing his role as the musical voice of the early republic. During his youth, he had traveled to England. He was hoping to secure a royal customs appointment from the king's ministers. Now, a customs appointment is a good way to make money if you're a young man. It's, overseeing the customs houses and overseeing the import-export business that the colonies would have. He wants that job because, obviously it pays well, but more importantly, it gets your foot in the door for becoming a colonial bureaucrat, which of course is a good career for anyone to have. The problem is that even though he travels all the way to England to get this appointment, his timing is really bad. He leaves to go do this in 1766, which you'll recall is a year after the Stamp Act, which is probably not the best time for a colonial to be saying, hey, I'd like to be your colonial, customs manager over here. Even he himself, he starts to realize this. And so when he's rejected for that appointment, he doesn't really take it all that badly. The positions had already been promised elsewhere. And the problem, of course, was the stamp collectors who had been promised these jobs now didn't have them. So they get their jobs. He's disappointed because he really wants to be useful. But he begins to understand that there's something that bothers him about this idea that the stamp collectors who were trying to enforce the Stamp Act have been promised these jobs which they're not really qualified for, which he is qualified for, and that begins to rattle in his head as a broken promise means a broken system. And this is when he begins to return to America in 1766. By the time he gets back, he is starting to realize that we need to criticize the British government. We need to decide that these people are not necessarily doing the best for us. Being the polymath that he is and the brilliant genius that he is, he realizes that the best way for him to actually take action here is to start writing. And so he writes a story. The story is called A Pretty Story. He also writes another one called The Prophecy. But it's this pretty story that really puts him on the map. Until Common Sense comes along later in 1776, it is a pretty story, which Hopkinson pens in the early 1770s. It's that story that really begins to fire up people for what's going on as wrong. It's an allegory. It's an idea about an old gentleman and his petty wife, their children, and how they are going to relate to their children. It's a proverb, if you will. And he begins to tell this story about how this king sends his sons out into the kingdom. They grow the land and they make all this money for the king, blah, 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 blah. And then the wife, Parliament, starts acting like you need to control these better. You need to be. It's a very proverbial story. And yet everybody who picks it up and reads it knows exactly what he's saying. He's saying King George III and the British Parliament are treating us like my character Jack in this story, who you're causing us to be rebellious, not because we want to be, but because you're treating us badly. There's this idea of a prophecy in his other book of this old tree, that Great Britain is an old tree that has to be cut down. Because if you don't cut down the old tree, there's no room for the new tree to grow. And again, when he writes this, everybody knows what he's saying. Everybody understands that he is, this is not veiled commentary. This isn't something where people are going, oh, that's a really nice story. I wonder what it's about. No, they know exactly what he's talking about. This young man who has gone to England, come back, seen the world, he understands exactly what he's saying, which is that this American idea that we have to pursue liberty, but in order to do that, we're going to have to throw off the British crown, is resonating with him. And his writings, like I said, are very well received, very well understood, and until Common Sense comes along, really considered to be the leading pamphlets for independence. Although
30 seconds here, Dave. Does his experience give him a better understanding of this than the common colonial would?
Well, they certainly understood what he was saying in his writings, so
yeah.
This idea that they were up here and everybody else was down there, I don't buy that. They knew what he was saying.
Very good. We continue with more Dave Does History in moments right here on WMMB. Good to have you with us on a Tuesday.
This is Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live, where the past isn't dusty, it's loaded, and sometimes still ticking. You may want to step back.
Glad you're along for Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live. Our hour brought to you by O'Galley Electric. Dave Bowman with the tale of Francis Hopkinson. As John Adams said, a pretty little curious, ingenious man. I like the description. Dave, where are we going now?
I left out the best part, though, with the head the size of a large apple.
Yeah, whatever that's supposed to mean.
I imagine Francis Hopkinson, the nation's first true composer, sitting in that room on July 4th, 1776. Imagine the gravity of this. He has already voted for independence on July 2nd on the Lee Resolution.
Mm-hmm.
But now the document is sitting in front of them. Now they're actually seeing the words. This is no longer this theoretical exercise. Here are the 27 grievances. Here is the preamble. Here is what we are actually doing. And you have to realize at that moment, of course, that this is treason. He has to be acutely aware of the danger. Reminded, no doubt, of Ben Franklin's words. We all have to hang together, or we should assuredly hang separately. He has to understand that. He's got to be aware of all this stuff going on. He's looking at the document. I imagine they're all looking at it, reading it, discussing it, deciding is this the final thing? And his mind probably wanders to his family. His family's over in New Jersey. New Jersey is very exposed to the British, who are by this point already moving on New York City. Even though we've just gotten the word about Sullivan's Island down in South Carolina and the victory there, things are moving very rapidly now. Thoughts drift to his wife, his children, his home in Bordentown, New Jersey, which is Phil, a man after my own heart. He has a library that's second to none, with all kinds of books and volumes and scientific experiments and all sorts of things going on. And as he's standing there, I imagine, reading over the document, you can read the words on the page. You can understand what we're saying. And you've got to understand that he's going to grasp what this actually means. If I say, yes, this is it, this is the document, and I've already voted for independence. But this document goes beyond just independence, doesn't it? This document makes accusations, and it makes complaints, and it clearly will be regarded by the King of England as treason. Is there a noose in my future? A noose in my future? A noose in my...
A big weighty moment, Dave, as these delegates gather together, and you're right. They've laid out the legal cause. They've laid out the reasons this must be done, and now they're going to sign it and send it off.
Well, they're actually not going to sign it yet. He actually won't sign this until August 2nd, which is actually when most of them sign it. The big myth about July 4th is everybody signed. No. The only person that signed on July 4th was Hancock, and because he was the president. But this is the day they approved that document. But even in that moment, your mind has to be thinking about all of these things in the future, and what is this going to mean? Because, again, we look at history as de facto, it had to happen this way. In 1776, no one knew what was going to happen. No one had any understanding of what this war meant, where it was going to go. All they had was an idea and a promise and a pledge to one another. And even as he is standing there on the morning of July 4th, giving his approval to the document, Hopkinson's mind is already churning. He is already doing things that we don't even understand. In fact, we've taken credit away from him for doing this. One of my favorite stories of early Americana, if you've ever listened to Afternoons Live with Dave and John, you know, is Flag Day and how Betsy Ross designed the American flag. It's one of our most popular episodes that we did.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not Betsy Ross that designs it. It's Francis Hopkinson who designs the original American flag. Now, there's some elements to it that he puts into it that aren't approved. He originally wants a 6-pointed star. That gets changed to a 5-pointed star, but it has the 13 stripes, the field of blue. That's his idea. That's his. In fact, it's so well established that it's his idea, Bill, that he sends Congress a bill for it later on saying, hey, look, I'd like to get paid for this. They never pay it because, you know, why would you? But at the same time, there's this, it's him that's doing this as he's sitting there going, okay, we're going to need a symbol. He designs the crest for the Naval Board and the Treasury boards that are going to lend legitimacy to the rebellion. We've established a government, and we have an admiralty, and we have a treasury, and these are our symbols. But most importantly, he actually designs the Great Seal of the United States, the original drawing of it, the olive branches designed for peace, the arrows for war, the shield with the red, white, and blue. The eagle is the symbol of power. It's the eagle. How many times have you heard this argument about how the eagle became our symbol? And, you know, Benjamin Franklin wanted the turkey and this, that, and the other. Hopkinson is the one who says, you know what? The eagle. He even adds the initial draft, on his initial draft, these words, e pluribus unum, from many, one. Mm-hmm. It's Francis Hopkinson who is sitting there in this room as the Declaration is presented, as it's laid out there, and I imagine it being on that table with that green felt on top of it, and each of these 56 men wandering by to read it and talk to each other about it. Are we sure this is what we wanted to say? Now, we've had 3 days of, arguing over it already, but now we've got the final thing here. And eventually we're going to have to put our names on it. And 56 of them will, including John Hancock, who will write his name very large, not because I love the story, not because he wants the king to be able to read it without his glasses, but because he's the president and leader of the Continental Congress at that point.
Sure.
So he gets to be first. But Francis Hopkinson standing in that room that morning, thinking of all these things that might happen and imagining the future. What will it be? Designing this flag, this seal, these ideas, these symbols, not of a rebellion, but of a nation. If that's not the definition of American exceptionalism, I don't know what is. He's looking forward, not backwards. Francis Hopkinson is there that day.
And again, in those depictions, those artistic renderings that he came up with of these symbols, he was drawing ideals that we still want to live up to more when we return.
Before there were headlines, there were hard choices. Toilet paper, should it be made out of trees or bamboo? Trees, thank goodness. You're listening to Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live.
Glad you're with us for this edition of Bill Mick Live. O'Galley Electric making the hour possible. By the way, coming up on the Glenn Beck Show in our next hour today, Vice President J.D. Vance joins Glenn Beck in hour number 1. I don't know for how long or exactly at what time, but that's coming up on the Glenn Beck Show right after hours here on WMMB. By the way, if you want to end with Dave, questions or comments about leading up to this 4th of July Declaration of Independence, 321-768-1240. Dave, where are we going now with Mr. Francis Hopkinson?
After careful consideration, obviously he agrees. He puts his name on the document on August 2nd, and this immediately makes him, along with all the other signers, a huge target for the British. Not just the British, but the Loyalists as well. And remember that the royal governor of New Jersey at this time is a guy by the name of William Franklin, who happens to be the son of Benjamin Franklin, and a pretty intense loyalist. There's this idea, I guess, somewhere out there that, we became rebels and that was it. It's the old argument. This country's never been more divided. Anybody who says that to you doesn't know anything about history, because we have been much more divided. And in fact, this makes him a target for loyalists who know where his house is as well. The British know where his house is because the loyalists tell him. And eventually they march to Bordertown in New Jersey, and they have orders. These Hessian troops have orders to burn this house because it belongs to one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. These Hessian troops, and we've talked about the mercenaries and what they were, march up to his house and they set it on fire. And as it's beginning to burn, there is an unknown, lost to history Hessian captain who's looking around the house and recognizes the incredible library that's here. All these volumes, all these scientific instruments, all these musical compositions. All of this stuff he recognizes, this Hessian captain recognizes, are the signposts of a very learned man. And this unknown, lost to a history Hessian captain says, you know what, don't burn this house. I know that this guy is a rebel. I know that he's on the other side. I know that the British don't like him, but this stuff can't be destroyed. Because if we destroy this, then we're just not human. And Francis Hopkinson's library is saved by this Hessian captain who just decides that, It's not worth doing all that. The other 56 men go through all kinds of situations, as you know. We've just picked him as just sort of an example. Some of the delegates would find themselves being captured. Francis Lewis would lose his Long Island estate when the British forces occupied New York. His wife was captured. His wife was mistreated and eventually released by the British, but broken and died thereafter. Carter Braxton would suffer severe financial losses, the war disrupting his shipping interest. And Thomas Nelson Jr. sacrificed much of his fortune to support the revolutionary cause. Others would, of course, go on to great accomplishment. Thomas Jefferson would become the third president of the United States. John Adams, the second. Benjamin Franklin, as you know, would be Ben Franklin. Others, Eldridge Gerry, would become influential in the formation of the Constitution. And Charles Carroll, the richest man in America, would continue to shape American politics for many decades. In fact, he would be the last surviving signer of the Declaration of Independence, would die in 1832 and be featured prominently in a Nicolas Cage movie, which is completely made up, but, the bottom line is he's still part of that. By signing this document, these 56 delegates permanently marked themselves as traitors to the British crown. They were operating under the constant threat of the noose, execution. Like Hopkinson, many of the signers suffered invasions of their homes, the brutal systematic plundering of their properties by enemy forces. And yet, in the end, Francis Hopkinson would say, I really esteem it an honor to have suffered in my country's cause, in support of the rights of human nature and of civil society. He didn't look at it as Goths and Vandals invading his home, which is how he would describe them. He didn't regret his actions. None of them turned back and said, you know what, I made a mistake. I'm gonna go Benedict Arnold on this and join the other side. And why is it that they didn't do that? What was it that motivated them beyond to be able to do that, to build a new foundation, the new roof in 1787, the idea of things that would happen later on down the line? What is it that bound them together? And of course, we read those words in the final paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. We have concluded, we do this to support this declaration. We put our names here to support this declaration with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor. With that firm reliance in providence, with that firm belief that the future held promise, they were willing to put their lives on the line, their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor in the hands of divine providence and write it out to the end. In 1787, Francis Hopkinson would become one of the leading Federalists. He would write again, because he was a writer. He would write a popular allegory called The New Roof to help persuade the public to ratify the Constitution. In 1788, he would organize a massive parade in Philadelphia that celebrated the Constitution. And you'll keep in mind that, in 1788, the Constitution hadn't been ratified yet. And he puts on a parade in Philadelphia to celebrate it. It united tradesmen and clergy, two groups that had hitherto not really seen eye to eye. In 1789, the first president of the United States, George Washington, would appoint him as the first federal judge of the Eastern District Court of Pennsylvania, where he would serve until his death in 1791. But imagine that moment, that morning of July 4th, 56 men standing there. All of them are thinking about what could go wrong. What might this cost me? What might it mean? And yet, with a firm reliance on Providence, they pledge to each other their lives, their fortune, and their sacred honor. And that, my friends, is what makes America exceptional.
Dave, it was ambitious to say the least. It was probably in some ways a little bit terrifying, because you had, even with the discomfort of being a British colony, you had the comfort of, we're part of something that's long established, historic, and we're going to crumble it up, throw it away, and start over, because we, like Ford will have in another couple hundred years, a better idea.
And yet at the same time, Bill, there's this understanding that you don't do these things for light and transient reasons.
Right.
You suffer these things until they are no longer sufferable. Mm-hmm. And then you have to make a decision. Are we going to change things, or are we just going to put up with it? The vast majority of human history has been mankind will suffer evils even beyond when they are sufferable. The secondary idea to that is that when we do rebel against abuse and tyranny, more often than not, it fails. In fact, it's very difficult to find a successful rebellion of the nature of the American Revolution. Why? Because we had a different idea. The Russian Revolution did not have that idea. The French Revolution started with it, but then lost focus, and that's where it went off the rails. The English Revolt of 1688, probably the closest in parallel. They had a plan for what they were going to do. We don't like the king, we're going to change the rules, and here are the rules that the new king will have to obey. And had they followed that, maybe we don't get an American Revolution. The history of humankind is that we will suffer and suffer and suffer. And yet here is this moment on July 4th, 1776, these men standing around Independence Hall. I still picture it, that table with the green felt, the parchment on it. And in my brain, I just picture Francis Hopkinson standing there as a composer, as a writer, as someone who understands things innately, perhaps just, kind of fingering the document a little bit, kind of moving it around on the table, fidgeting with his hands. And I'm not even sure that he really had to make a decision that morning. I'm not even sure that he questioned whether or not he would sign it. I think what went through his mind was, will the future be worth my name on this document? What will we suffer? What will happen to us as a country? What will happen tomorrow? And the answer is, you don't know. You have no idea. But if you don't set out with that ideal, if you don't start with this idea that we hold these truths to be self-evident, all men are created equal, even though we know that today we don't necessarily practice that, tomorrow's a new day. And you have to start somewhere. The journey of 1,000 steps begins with one. And here is the step we are going to take to become the exceptional country that we will become. And you can thank Francis Hopkinson for that.
And they spent their time, as they were going through this, and as we talked about the various committees they had in play, with a plan to go forward when this was done. A key to getting us to where we are today, where 250 years later, we can celebrate, Dave.
I've felt the fear of failure, seen the gallows in my mind. I have wondered if our children will forgive what we consign. But a nation isn't born from the timid or the tame. It is forged by those who answer when the call speaks out their name.
With a firm
full of danger, still we choose to carry on. For the promise of tomorrow is a light that leads us on. We are many, we are different, yet we rise as something more. Every doubt becomes a whisper, every fear a distant shore. For the oath we take together makes the smallest voices strong, and the courage of the many turns a fragile hope to song.
I will stand beside my neighbor.
We'll hold the line with you.
I will give what I have promised.
I will see this struggle through.
For the freedom of our children,
for the justice we proclaim,
we will sign our names to history and accept the weight of flame.
So we steady our conviction, though the road is steep and long. For the truth demands our courage, and the weak must become the strong.
With a firm reliance on providence above, we pledge our lives and fortunes in a bond of sacred love.
Though the night is full of danger, still we choose to carry on. For the promise of tomorrow is a light that leads us on.
With a firm reliance on providence above, we pledge our lives and fortunes in a bond of sacred love.
And together standing steadfast, we will face what must be done. For the freedom of a people is a fire that can't be undone.